Hi everyone, my name is Kim and I'm the founder and creator of Expat Mama. This is a new YouTube channel that just got started in October of 2021. This will be the 26th interview. And this interview is done in both, this channel is in both English and Spanish. Our format is to talk about what it's like to be an expat, which is somebody who's left their native country to live in another country, in some cases, other countries. Today, my guest is Robert Harper from Kansas City, Missouri in the US. I'm so excited to interview him today. So how are you doing today, Robert?
I'm doing great. Thanks so much, Kimberly, for inviting me.
You're very welcome. I've been wanting to interview you for a while, so I'm glad we were able to make it work. So
yeah,
we kind
of went back and forth on schedule a little bit.
That's what happens with all my interviews. Actually, we're busy people, you know.
Yep.
And in my case, you know, I'm still dealing with the COVID issues. So, but if I have a day that's just a little bit better, we're going to make it work. I feel good enough to be here. So anyway, can you tell us a bit about where you're from and how you grew up?
So I grew up in Chicago area, just outside Chicago, and the Bears. And right at 19, after graduating from high school, went into the Army, and my family moved to Springfield, Missouri, and met my wife returning there one time in Springfield, Missouri. We got married and raised our children, our beautiful 3 kids in Kansas City. After I got out of the Army, I became very entrepreneurial, and I own a company still to this day in Kansas City, and it's become part of my nature. Pretty much wherever I live, I look for that next business to start. And up until next year, I had done that in a number of places. And last year I sold all my businesses except for the one in Kansas City, which I still own.
Okay. What kind of business is that, if I may ask?
We help schools, universities, and churches with active shooter situations. ACS Electronics is the name.
Oh, wow.
And we do everything from consultation to engineering to implementation of systems and processes to reduce the number of deaths in an active shooter situation.
That is just that's such a, it just makes such a it's kind of a shocking thing to hear that that's even a business that you have to offer, because I mean, how did that come about?
Well, our business started as a security company, commercial security, where we helped, companies have intrusion, fire, access control, CCTV. And a number of years ago, over 20 now, we helped our first school district harden a school because they had an active shooter situation occur. And it became our vertical market, our niche, because it is unfortunately an amazingly growing market in the US. We average in the US an active shooting 1 per day. So if you're gonna, and the numbers to make that,
Wow.
Just to give you background, to be an active shooting, it has to be a person with a gun that injures or kills at least 3 people in a public place.
Wow.
So it's quite a growing market. And after we helped that particular district, it started to grow from there. And now it eats up quite a bit of our time helping school districts, churches, universities to try to reduce the number of deaths that could happen during an active shooting.
Yeah, the other day I was giving a class, because I give classes online, and one of my students said, I've had a kind of a stressful day, and he's 10 years old, and he says we had we had a situation at our school. This is in Texas somewhere, and I'm like, what happened? And he says, all of a sudden, we were forced to turn off all the lights in the classroom. And I'm not really sure what really truly happened, because he couldn't vocalize what had happened, what had just happened to him. But all of a sudden and I said, well, was it a drill? I was pressing him to get more details. And he says, no, it wasn't a drill. It wasn't a drill. We just had to go under our desk and go silent. And that's what we did for a little bit of our school day today. And I was like, and so, I'm like this empath, so I kept asking, how did that make you feel? Trying to get that out of a 10-year-old boy.
Tough, very tough.
Very, very tough. And he could not, he says, I don't know how I felt like that. It was just, I don't really know what happened. So he was kind of like blindsided by the whole situation, a little perplexed, as it would be for kids, but I didn't get the feeling that he was terrified. So I guess whatever happened at that school, they handled things the right way, or the best scenario under whatever. Maybe they were one of your clients.
Yeah, it could be. At the end of the day, the hope is that the building is locked down and you avoid an entry situation. Because if there's an entry situation, the one thing we know for sure statistically, it's not a question of if you can talk down the shooter. At that point, it's too late. People are going to die. Now you have to reduce the number that die.
Okay, so your specific task, or you do a lot of training for school districts, like how to avoid that situation before it gets out of hand?
Well, we do a lot of consulting and installation of equipment to make the school district a harder target, to make a building a harder target.
Okay.
And it isn't just schools. Churches also are having this issue right now. So, we try to harden the target, and then we educate the people, because I think that's maybe the hardest part of our mission is to explain to especially educators who are so kind-hearted that you're going to have to make awful choices in a situation like this. And then we also have to train them on how to respond when first responders arrive on the scene. Most people in the US believe that during a active shooter situation, when a first responder shows up there, they are there to save the victims. But that is not the first responder's job. Their job is to put down the shooter. And
oh, wow.
Unless,
I mean, you're changing my whole mentality about like a scenario like this. We didn't grow up this way, so for you to be saying this kind of thing, I mean, it really indicates the kind of climate that the US, and how long has this been going on? I mean, we don't hear a lot of this on the news. Most of it probably isn't on the news, right?
Well, a lot of it is local.
Local,
right? It gets diffused. So let me just give you an example of what can put a school into a lockdown scenario.
Okay.
And once I explain it, you'll understand why most of these don't hit the news. I know a particular school that my son went to when he was 10 that went into lockdown situation because a parent who, due to a divorce settlement, was not allowed, he had a restraining order against being with his child, called the school and said, I'm coming to pick up my child. And the school district said, I'm sorry, we have notification you can't. And he said, well, I'm coming with a gun and I'm taking my kid.
Oh my God.
Well, that school just went into lockdown.
Yeah, of course.
Right? But that lockdown isn't going to hit NBC. That lockdown is going to hit the local paper. Or I'll give you one other. Or not. Right.
I have another example. Go ahead and say what you were going to say, but I have kind of a funny example, but go ahead and finish what you said and then I'll continue on.
We had this has happened more than once at a particular district that we work with, where a bank, in this case, it was a bank, was robbed in the neighborhood. Well, as soon as that happens and the SRO officer in the district, one of them, hears of it, they lock down the entire district, because the last thing you want is a fugitive fleeing from a crime scene, running through one of your buildings. And when you're talking about a small town, you don't want to turn what was a felony situation into a hostage situation. So those are just two that would never hit the evening news as a school situation, but both of them impacted districts that needed to do something to harden the target of their buildings.
So interesting. So here's my son, who had just, this is back in 2012 or 13. We had just lost dad in Argentina. This was 10 years ago. And my kids, you know, had just changed countries. We'd gone from Argentina to US, specifically Utah, South Jordan, Utah. And my son finds he's snooping through my mom's house. He finds a pocket knife and decides he wants to show it to his classmates in first grade. My kids were just adapting to a new culture, and my first grader goes to school with his pocket knife. I got a call from the principal. I was in the middle of a business meeting at that time. I get a call and like, your son's been suspended from school. And I'm like, what's happened here? You know? And the school went into lockdown because of my son. And that's when I learned, oh, okay, things are not like they are in Argentina, where it's just so relaxed, you know. We're in a different culture, in a stricter culture. It was the reverse culture shock for me, seeing my kids go through their adaptation to the very, very strict US under different political and social climate. I don't even know what, maybe you can define what I'm even talking about, but things had changed in the 16 years that I hadn't been living in the US.
You know, so here would be the argument I would have for the middle ground that should exist. But districts right now are so literally gun shy that they had to go to an extreme to protect their building, right?
Mm-hmm. That's what I thought. I'm like, he's a first grader. He doesn't even know the culture. He didn't grow up here. That's my thought as a mom, you know. They didn't take that into account. It went from this to, I can't even put it on the camera.
And when you think about their historical issues they're having over the last 20 years, I guess I can understand how they've reacted to these kind of things, because the last thing a district or a church or a university wants is to be in the news for a situation. And, you know, we've had active shooters that are kids as young as 12. So they're, again, I don't know a good way to solve this in the US that the US politically can deal with. So they're reacting the way they are to protect the kids. And again, nobody wants to get the phone call that, you know, I got when my son was 10, that the building is under lockdown.
Because of your child.
Yeah.
And my son, we had to leave that school because he immediately got a reputation as being a child terrorist. And then we moved. I bought a house in another city in northern Utah, a smaller town. And I don't know what he did in 5th grade, but he had to be over supervised. he had to be taken from my car. There was a teacher waiting for me, said some kind of thing. Oh, I know what it was. I know what. I mean, this is going to make you laugh, but I think you're going to understand. You know, the kids were just talking among them. There are three kids talking. One says, I hate school. I would rather be at home. And the other one says, I'd rather be at school because I get bored at school. And here's my son. I would rather bomb the school. Okay, here we go again. I got another phone call. That was at the very beginning of 5th grade, 5th or 6th grade, I can't remember exactly. In a new town where nobody knew us, you know, and I'm like, we're just breaking into this place. And my son again mouths off, and he's just a stupid kid. I mean, there's nothing else, there's nothing I can say about it. The kid, I have an Argentinian kid who's very impulsive, half Italian, who just doesn't even realize the implications of the things he said. And again, they took it from here to there again. And I'm like, when is this going to end? You know, I can't have my kid be labeled a terrorist in the US.
Yeah, I think where the current political structure is in the States and the current active shooter situation that's in the States, this doesn't end in my lifetime.
Okay.
It only gets worse in my lifetime. And I don't know what's the correct word to say. I'm using the term worse as in more lockdown prone, but I'm not sure it is worse.
Paranoid might be closer to the word. This is what I felt like. You know, we've been abroad for so long, and come back and I feel like the US is not only, it was always uptight. American culture is uptight and critical of a lot of things and very intolerant. But this had gone from that point to complete paranoia, in my very humble opinion.
Well, as a person whose industry is there,
okay,
and who reacts after active shooting situations often, you're not paranoid if it's really happening. Of course. Are dying because other kids are putting their hands on weapons and coming to school with them. There's probably the right compromise in between, but America's not used to doing compromise. That's not our thing.
Yes, you're right. You're right.
Which brings us to why I live where I live.
Okay, let's lead into that. Thank you.
Oh.
So where are you located now?
Right now, I live in San Miguel de Allende, which you have a wonderful picture there behind you of.
I'm going to back out of this for a second so you can see how beautiful this is.
That is the most photographed street, Cuna de Allende in San Miguel de Allende. The big reason that is so often photographed is because it's this wonderful picture of the parroquia, the church here in San Miguel. And what we're looking at right now is actually the back of the church. The front of the church is even more amazing. Mm-hmm. And that church is quite famous because it is the #1 church in Mexico to be married in. If you are a young Catholic girl here in Mexico, every family wants their little girl to be married in the church in Allende because it's this pink magic castle kind of look. Mm-hmm. And inside is beautiful. And so every Saturday you can go down to the Jardín, which is right in front of the church, and one wedding progression after another will come out. And, you know, they have the wedding party there, and they will get behind a burro, which is carrying 2 barrels of tequila. And if you walk up and wish the bride and groom good luck in your new marriage, you get a shot of tequila from the wedding party, and you join the procession as it goes around the town.
Wow.
So yeah, it is a very cool place to the Jardín is a cool place to hang out on a Saturday and just enjoy people watching and an occasional shot of tequila as the wedding burro goes by.
Oh, awesome. Let me come back on camera here. That was a great lead-in of San Miguel. And obviously you can see from the picture how colorful that street is. What kind of a place is San Miguel de Allende, Mexico?
San Miguel is one of the magic towns here in Mexico, which means that once upon a time, or even now in some cases, there was some type of mineral that was being mined near San Miguel, and the church put a lot of dollars into building a city there so that they could grab those minerals and use them. So it's this beautiful UNESCO heritage site, cobblestones, wonderful colors, and because we're at altitude that we're at the exact same altitude as Denver, except no snow.
Is that so? Wow.
We have year-round perfect weather. So, and from a gringo point of view, from an expat point of view, right after World War II, a gringo came to San Miguel and started an art institute, and then convinced the Department of Army to allow GIs to come here and spend their GI Bill to study art. And the side effect of that is we have a nice expat community here, and everybody's an artist here. The light is perfect. The temperature is perfect. And you have everything ranging from sculptors to painters to photographers. Everybody here, whether it's professional or passion or both, come here for the light and for the art. And the side effect is you have a town very, very eclectic.
Eclectic, I love that. That's a good word.
Yep. So
you've got, and what else? What else? What was your draw? I mean, it's not, you've got perfect weather. So basically, can we say you're living in the land of Camelot?
well, from a weather point of view,
Yes.
Absolutely. I moved here from Belize. I'd been living in Belize for a couple of years. And in Belize, there are 3 seasons. There is tourist season, black fly season, and mosquito season. And it was wonderful to live on this island, enjoyed it, but the weather just wears you down. So we decided we wanted to find someplace that was more conducive to year-round living. And the promise my wife and I made when we left the States, there was only one promise we made each other, which was we would never live in Mexico. And the reason, right? And the reason for that is, of course, we had listened to the US as they explained how dangerous it was, right? So my daughter, who at the time also lived in Belize, and her son and her husband and her daughter said, we're going to go look at Mexico. And we said, okay, well,
good luck to you.
We'll go,
have fun.
We'll go, but we're not moving there.
We're not moving there. Before you go on, this is where things get really juicy and good, because I have to confess, now that we're in true confessions here, my only experience going to Mexico was so terrifying for me. Of course, crossing over into Tijuana, right?
Right. I mean,
from
as
San
if
Diego,
that's Mexico.
I was persecuted the whole time, harassed to buy something, and I couldn't get on that bus to go back to the US fast enough. I thought, if this is what Mexico is, I don't see how anyone could possibly live. That was my image of Mexico. So I'm gonna love what you're gonna say, and I know it's gonna get even better, because there is nothing like never say never that proves you wrong. And this is where things get good. Take it away.
Right. So we come here and we look at Querétaro, Guanajuato, and San Miguel. All of them towns that are very similar in altitude and weather. We were here in July. That's where we started. And you got to remember, we're leaving Belize in July, which is, the hottest time. And most of Belize is closed down because it's a very slow tourist time. It is sweltering in Belize as we leave, and we arrive here. And at night, it's in the 50s, and there's no air conditioning and in any homes. And during the day, it gets up to 76, and there's 12% humidity. And so we fell in love.
And it rains at night.
It rains at night. We almost never have rain during the day. Our rainy season, I could probably count on both hands the number of times that during the day I couldn't go for a walk because it was raining. I mean, it's so rare. So we fell in love with this, and again, we were here in July. By January that year, we had moved to San Miguel. We have lived here ever since. That was going on 5 years now. 2 years ago, I lost my wife. She passed away. And I still live here when I'm not traveling, and I travel all the time. But the reason we chose San Miguel over Querétaro and Guanajuato, both of them beautiful towns, by the way, is San Miguel was easier. You could live here knowing extremely little Spanish. And at the time, because Belize is an English speaking country, we knew very little Spanish. And the idea of easing into the culture was very appealing, and San Miguel just made it extremely easy. On the other hand, my daughter and son-in-law and their children found San Miguel appealing because there were expats here that were their age and with kids, and there was a community for them. So it's kind of interesting when we get together for events, like we're from Kansas City originally. So needless to say, if there's a Chiefs game on, there's an event occurring in my family. And we'll get together at my daughter's home because it's so much bigger. She has 3 children, and her friends will be there and my friends will be there. And you can see this rainbow of ages in the room as her friends with their kids and my friends who are, 50s and above. And it gives you a really good feeling for why San Miguel's kind of special that way.
That's kind of like Mexican living.
It is.
That's Latin American living, because it's not like, and so that leads into what I'm thinking here to ask you is, how has living in Latin America specifically, even though it was your first country was Belize, have you lived in any countries besides Belize and Mexico?
We are really, our first country that we spent significant time in was Guatemala.
Okay.
And Guatemala City. And then from there, Belize, from there, Colombia, and then finally Mexico. Colombia was more of a slow travel situation than an expat situation. We spent a couple months there and fell in love with that country.
Like me, I'm adding that country to as my 4th country. Yeah.
Yeah.
Colombia's beautiful.
And so, we've been in a number of places in Central America and enjoyed all of them. But again, San Miguel, I think, is the easiest to live in out of everywhere we've been. And it's also pretty easy to make a home base to travel out of. 45 minutes, you can be at the Querétaro airport and fly pretty much anywhere.
Okay, wait for me, I'll be there. I gotta go check
Okay.
this place out. I gotta check this place out. We were talking right before we started recording and it's like, okay, I've gotta go check it out. Okay, so you've been living in a handful of Latin American countries.
Yes.
So you're talking a lot about the benefits of being an expat. What have you learned from being in these different cultures?
Well, Latin America in general is very much a family-oriented culture.
Right.
This is tough for an American male who when we come here, well, not when we come here, when we pop out of the womb, we start to identify with what we do. And Latins in general, not just Latin Americans, but Latins in general, much more identify with their family than what they do. I think one of the hardest habits for me to get out of was when I first met someone, asking them what they do. That isn't something Latins do. You can talk about just about anything, but for Latins, what they do is how they make money to have a life, not how they identify themselves as a human being. And so that's a huge cultural change, especially for us gringos. Huge.
Because our identity, I study this. I study a lot of like cultural identity. I was this whole last week I was giving classes in my ESL classes, English as a second language, about cultural identity. And I was teaching a Mexican American who currently lives in Atlanta, Georgia. Okay. And I'm like, okay. And I said, how long have you been with the company that you're working for? Because the employer is paying for her English classes. Okay. And she said, I've been working in this company for 10 years. And I said, oh, wow, that's like, an eternity for me as a typical American to think that I would work in any single company for 10 years. That just seems like I would resign myself to death.
Right.
But she's come from Mexico, where things you stay with what you what is that expression? You keep dancing with the one that brought you.
Right. And that isn't how she identifies herself. Whatever that job is, that's just how she makes money for her life. Right.
Exactly. And she doesn't think about like changing jobs. Which I can't even imagine staying in a company. Of course, both of us are serial entrepreneurs. So we have a whole different mentality, but like working for somebody like for 10 years, that just to me just seems so, it's like a ball and chain for me.
Yeah, very much a foreign concept with that? For us.
Yeah. But it's like you say, it's the difference between the work to live, which is Latin America for the most part, and us as live to work. And at that cost, we as Americans, it's probably the biggest cause of divorces, because we're giving priority to work and not to our spouses and our children, and things that honestly are in the long term are the more important things, which is family.
Right. We
giving priority to relationships.
Right. And that's something Mexicans do very well.
Very well.
Once you are here for any period of time, it's impossible that you don't end up getting invited, as an example, to a child's birthday party.
Yeah.
And for those folks that are thinking about becoming expats, let me just say this. If you get invited to a local's birthday party, for the love of God, go. You're going to have a blast. Because it's nothing like an American birthday party at all. And it gives you a really good insight of how they view family first and everything else second.
If any culture is prevailing in this country, in Mexico, it is family.
Absolutely.
And they have a huge network of people. I mean, if we don't have community, which also for expats, this is a big draw, is in the US, I don't even care where you're from, even in small towns, you don't have even a fraction of the community that you would have in Mexico.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Here is, you know, you get to meet so many people, and I'm not just talking about locals. I mean, expats who come here also become part of this big community. Okay, so let's kind of kill the elephant in the room, if you will. Nobody who leaves the US and lives remotely, is it a little odd? We all are. If we were the normal people
Guilty.
in the US, right? If we were normal, we'd be in Cleveland. You know, we're a little bit of an odd bunch.
We are.
And it's kind of cool to have a complete community of odd bunches.
Oh, amen to that. Amen to that. But which also, I mean, you travel a lot more than I do, but do you find, for example, well, most of your family is abroad now. Is that fair to say?
No.
No.
I
Okay,
have
never
one
mind.
daughter and son-in-law and 3 grandkids here in Mexico. The rest of my family live in the States.
Okay.
And I'm the odd one.
And you're the odd one like me, or we should call ourselves black sheep or whatever.
Whatever, right?
Okay, they're all synonymous for the same thing. So do you also find that when you go back to visit them, which you do, that nobody can relate to you? You become like this unrelatable person, and what you just told me before we started recording, that you don't tend to like really tell what it's like living abroad because they just can't handle it. And what I cannot handle, because I've been abroad for 21 years at this point, is why, and maybe you can help me answer this question, is why don't they ask questions? I came up from a country like Argentina where I got there and all of the love and affection and certainly attention that I had never had in the US, because the typical American is it safe to say is, or at least the woman is very unvalidated, and they never feel like they're like good enough, because it's like this competition that you can, and there's always somebody who's better than you or richer, and they're always trying to one up you. That is definitely a big trait of American culture. I get down in Argentina, all of a sudden I have these people that are so excited to get to know me. I'm like, why do they get to know me? I'm just like this middle-class girl. I'm nothing special. They made me feel like a complete celebrity. I mean, I got love bombed all over the place, but that was just normal culture there. And you had mentioned that that you were in Colombia and maybe even in Mexico, but especially in countries like Colombia, they're farther out. There's lots of expats in Mexico. It is the #1 expat country.
Right.
But in some ways, you become like this celebrity, and darn it, we get used to that attention.
Especially in Colombia, we felt that way.
Especially in Colombia.
Medellin, Colombia, we were the show.
You were the show.
You're the gringos. Somebody's going to come up and when I say somebody, I mean like every other day. You're going to have a local come up to you and say something along the lines of, "Thank you for coming to my country."
Yeah.
And want to get to know you. Now, I will say, when I visit the States and I'm visiting family in the States, because I'm such an oddity, I get introduced based on my oddness. So I'll be visiting my sister who lives in Florida, and she'll introduce me to her friend, and she'll say, one of her friends, and she'll say, "This is my brother, Robert." And they'll say something like, "Oh, you're the one who lives in Mexico."
Yeah.
So I've been introduced sometime in the past in a conversation as the odd one, right?
Of course.
Which is cool, because I am.
You are the odd one.
I am the odd one. So I think there are some family who see this as something that's cool that they like. And then I have other family members who, when I'm introduced, the person will ask me, where do you live? And I say, I live in San Miguel de Allende, Mexico. And sometimes you get this look of, or even the question, why would you want to live there?
Exactly. That's the most common, me from Utah, it's not, I mean, it's Mormonville,
Right.
And,
Right.
and my journey in life has led me away from Mormonism.
Right.
I apostatized. I left my lifetime religion after 50 years. So I'm not only the oddball, but I'm the apostate. I'm the one who dared leave the tribe. So I'm in a I don't even know where I'm at, but I'm feared. Who knows? I'm the one who shook, who dared to jump out of that boat and who swam against the current. And guess what? A fish who swims against the current gets electrocuted.
Yeah, so in our homeland country's defense,
Okay,
for what it's
help
worth,
me understand here.
if everybody who was getting ready to retire and getting Social Security realized that there are places in the world that they would not only be welcomed, but financially their value of lifestyle could increase so dramatically.
So dramatically.
Nobody who is in bed with the common culture of the US wants that message out. They don't want the people who retire in the US to say, dang, I can go to places in Asia with better healthcare, better lifestyle, and my money goes 10 times further. Nobody wants it, let alone Mexico. I'm just saying in the world.
That's a hard pill to swallow for a lot of people, isn't it, Robert?
Oh, it's scary.
It's a scary pill. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Again, we were talking about this before we started the interview. Somewhere a little under 40% of Americans have a passport. Mm-hmm. Now, when you talk to people outside of the US, the passport rate is huge. You go to Europe and you say, how many, do you have a passport? Asking a person in Europe if you have a passport is the equivalent of asking them if they have toes. Of course they have a passport.
Of course they have a passport. Yeah.
That's a crazy
Don't be
question.
stupid. That's a crazy question.
Right.
But asking that in the US, they're like, and I, to my credit, I've been responsible for helping a lot of people get their passports. I'm like, but they still haven't put their first stamp on there, that they've got their passport at least. Okay. And that for them was like a big step. And they're carefully watching my steps to see where I'm going. And I'm now going to be going on my fourth country, which is, from Argentina to Mexico and adding Colombia. Whoa, Colombia, Pablo Escobar land. That's like way out there, But
when we went to Colombia, when we went to Colombia, boy, family and friends all were like, oh my God, what are you, crazy?
Exactly.
And today, if I had to pick a country to live in that wasn't Mexico City, I would be living in Medellin, Colombia. If an American asked me, where would you go to do a startup company in Central America, I would say, get your butt to Medellin. That is the Silicon Valley of Central America right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And everybody there is working on a side hustle. And it's just a very powerfully energetic place to start a business.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I coincide. We were blown away by Medellin. You'll see on my channel lots and lots of Colombian interviews. We're planning on traveling there this summer.
Yeah,
to see how we can create this part-time in Mexico, part-time in Colombia kind of lifestyle.
and I would really recommend it. Beautiful country,
Beautiful.
beautiful people. I never felt unsafe ever there,
Neither do we. Yeah.
but I don't feel unsafe here. Now,
Mhm.
I've even had expats come here that just came from the US and are very, very skittish, you know, still. But that's not surprising. When we
Mhm.
left the US, we were always asked by family and friends the same two questions in this order. One,
Is it safe?
aren't you afraid? Aren't you afraid?
It's the fear. Yep.
Right. Aren't you afraid? And you know, our answer always was no, we're excited, not afraid at all. And
Yeah.
two,
Yeah.
the second question was, what happens if you get sick?
Yeah.
And those are always the top two questions. Now, today, when somebody asks me these questions, and they say, aren't you afraid living there? My answers depend on if I think I want them as a neighbor.
Well, I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
Sure. My answer to people when they ask these questions today changes depending on if I want them as a neighbor.
I love it.
Right? If I don't want this person as a neighbor, my answer is it's very scary. You're much safer. You're much safer in America. But
that's hilarious. But because what I know where you're going with this, because you're like, if I want them as a neighbor, they're going to be like the clingiest, neediest person that I never wanted to have in my life.
Right. Or the very typical
ugly American.
Ugly American.
Yeah.
I'll give you an example. Last night I was at a local restaurant, which I walked to a couple miles from my home, and had dinner with a friend here. And there was an ugly American, a table over, and they had these four people who were visiting here on vacation were complaining about the help. And as an example, their complaint was at this moment was nobody had brought them the bill. And right, you know where I'm going.
I know exactly where you're going.
So I felt compelled to explain to him the reason you haven't been brought a bill is because you haven't asked for it.
Mhm.
And Mexicans feel it's insulting to bring you a bill until you ask for it, because they view it as saying to you, get out.
Exactly.
And Mexicans don't ever want you to feel like you're not welcome. So you could sit there for the next 2 hours, past closing, have a conversation, and nobody's going to bring you a bill until you look over and say, you know, Hovid, I need a bill.
Mhm.
La cuenta, por favor. Until you say that, you are not going to get a bill in Mexico.
Por favor. Right.
See?
And these poor people, I don't know what time they were going to get home. And many times you're in the middle of a really great conversation in a restaurant with someone. You're enjoying your time and you're like, oh crap, we better get out of here. It's probably closing time. And people, you can hear them doing their dishes and everything.
Right.
But
They closed,
they're not going to kick
they closed
you out.
30 minutes ago.
That's happened to us. I'm like, oh crap, we should have gone out. These people need to get home. I know this has happened to you, but in Colombia, I found it to be even more culturally ingrained in them. Because in Mexico, they will gently suggest at some point, you know, do you want the bill?
Right.
In Mexico, but in Colombia, that is a big faux pas, huge faux pas. And I was like, oh crap, we've been here way too long. They should have asked us for the bill, was my thought, you know. And you know, we're just, and then all this, and then they were so overly polite. I wasn't used to that level of politeness. And I know you know what I'm talking about in Colombia, because if you, like, I remember we were in Poblado, which is in Medellin, beautiful neighborhood, expat, upper class, not upper class, help me out here with the words. It's a very upscale neighborhood.
Very upscale.
Very upscale, touristic. So we went to this mall called Viva Envigado, which is even more upscale. I've never seen such a luxurious mall as I saw in that mall. So we're there with another American friend, another single mom with her kids, and we were just trying to get out. It was super busy. The traffic was insane. So they were in a different taxi behind us, and the cars were going everywhere. But there were some people standing on the sidewalk, Colombians. And as soon as we got out, obviously, it's like you say, we're not going to ever blend in.
No.
It's not going to happen immediately. American. We have this radar that says, look at me, you know,
Yeah.
and we just can't blend in. So immediately, they first of all, they didn't even offer us, talk to us in Spanish. It just went immediately, can I help you? You know, and I was like, what? You know, I'm used to being in Latin America and not having to have that English assistance, but they were immediately like, these poor people, you know, they need help because they're going to get run over. And I thought we were going to get run over.
We're lost. They're lost.
You're lost. But I was for sure. I was lost. It was like our second day there after we arrived on a late plane. I don't know, but we probably just looked like a deer in the headlights to them.
Right.
And they just helped us at every turn. They were so hospitable. I was overly impressed by the culture. And it's a culture I want more of.
Yeah, and Central Americans.
I want my kids to learn to be nice. I want my kids to learn this forma de ser. I want them to learn from the Colombians, because I think that there isn't enough kindness in the world. And I think that is the place where we're going to learn it.
Yeah, I would say that that's been my experience, at least in Central America and with Latins in general. I shouldn't say Central America because, as any one of my Latin friends will tell me, my Mexican friends, Mexico is not Central America. Mexico is North America.
It is North America, yeah.
But Latins in general are very kind people.
Yes, they are.
And so back to the original question, we moved here and fell in love with it. And this has been home base through all my travels ever since.
Oh, I love it, love it, love it. So would you say that, I've heard this from other expats there in San Miguel, that it is a soft place to land, which means it's absolutely easy. It's probably the most pleasant place you could land, one of the most pleasant on this planet.
Absolutely. So if your only experience with Mexico is, as I like to refer to it, Miami South, Cancun, Cozumel, Tulum, you're going to be in for a hell of a culture shock when you come here, because those towns are so tourist based that you're constantly confronted with somebody trying to sell you something.
Playa de Carmen is the worst.
Right, exactly. Here in San Miguel, I walk every day in San Miguel, and unless I'm in the Centro at the Jardín and start looking at something that a vendor might be selling, such as ice cream or something, I'm not going to be approached by somebody trying to sell me something. So the culture is totally different. This is a very soft place to start your life. If you were an expat, I would argue, and by the way, very affordable. Although this is one of the most expensive cities to live in Mexico.
Correct.
It is also one of, when compared to the US, the cost of living here is so significantly different. Let me just give you an example. I'm coming from Kansas City, the heart of Middle America, a very affordable place to live in America.
By American standards.
By American standards. We're not talking about San Francisco or New York here. We're talking about Kansas City, right? So let me give you just some numbers as a reference for here in Mexico, my lifestyle. So my rent and utilities, everything, including high-speed internet, cable TV, electricity, gas, runs me around $840 a month. I have a 3-bedroom, 3-bath home that I rent here with 1, 2, 3, 4 terraces.
Whoa,
And
4 terraces.
yeah, hey, if you're gonna move here, get a terrace because you want to live outside.
Love it.
So I have that home that I rent. My main vehicle is a quad, a 4x4. That's plated and licensed, and I can drive anywhere. And I have a maid that comes in twice a week. Okay. That lifestyle cost me less than $1,000 a month, right?
Unbelievable. Yeah.
Now in the US, I couldn't rent a 3-bedroom home for under $1,000 a month in Kansas City. And the reason I know that is I own property in Kansas City that I rent out. So first off, it's an affordable place, even though it's one of the most expensive places in Mexico to live. Also, English is very ubiquitous here. You can survive. I have many expat friends, embarrassingly enough, who know so little Spanish that I would consider it insulting. But in San Miguel, you can live with knowing only, thank you and where's the bathroom.
Oh, you have to ask for the bill though.
You do have to, yes. La cuenta, por favor.
La cuenta, por favor. ¿Dónde está el baño? Which is, where's the bathroom? You need to ask for the bill. What's another thing that you better know? You better know at least another phrase.
So I'm going to tell you the phrase that I think is the most important for an expat to learn coming to Mexico. And this is the phrase. Lo siento, hablo español un poquito. I think that's the most important phrase to learn.
Which, let me translate it for those that don't even know a minimum amount of, I'm so sorry, but I only speak a little bit of Spanish.
Right. And with that one.
Por favor, hable despacito. Speak slowly.
Slowly, please.
Please, but please on everything. And gracias. They say thank you for every little favor that they give you because they'll be very gracious with you.
The minute I say that, the moment I say that I speak very little Spanish, everything changes on their expectation, and they instantly go to help mode. To the point where I've been at one point I was in Celaya here. This is a couple of years ago at a Subway state and grabbing a torta sandwich. And I just started learning some Spanish and I never realized till that moment how difficult it is to order ingredients for a Subway sandwich without knowing Spanish.
Love it.
And so I'm standing in line and I started with that. I'm sorry, I speak very little Spanish. And the local next to me goes, I'll translate. What do you want? That clear English, right? And that happens all the time.
All the time, yeah.
So
excuse me, which would you say, I'm in the Lake Chapala area, which area of our 2 areas, because I think our areas are the 2 biggest expat areas in Mexico, right? Which do you think has the bigger concentration or population of expats, your area or my area? It's kind of
okay. Yeah, I'm gonna differ, and I think Puerto Vallarta probably has more.
Oh, okay. Thank you for that clarification. Okay.
Having said that, I actually think the Lake region probably has more expats than San Miguel does. But
That's what I think too.
it's hard to be sure, right? Because we don't get counted for anything. Nobody's counting us. Nobody comes here and says, I'm sorry, I'm a census taker. I need to track you expats. So it's really tough.
That is highly offensive to me because I want to stand up and be counted.
Yeah. Right. That's what we came here to Mexico for.
We came here to be a celebrity, to be
counted,
and we want to be counted, and we want everyone to know who we are. Amen.
Yes, exactly. Right. So often I
that way. There is a bit of an entitlement. That's why I can make fun of it with clout here.
Yeah, exactly.
I know you do.
So I have locals who are friends of mine who are in politics who, when asked, will say that the expat community here is between 10 and 20,000 people. And we're in a town here of about 140,000. So we make up maybe 10 to 15% of the population, according to these numbers. And whenever they bring this up to me, I ask them, how did you come up with that number? Mm-hmm. And of course, the answer is, we're guessing. We're just guessing.
No say.
No say. So it'd be tough, but in my experience, I would say there's probably more than that at the lake. Not just Bahia, but all around.
I would dare to say there's 4 small towns along Lake Chapala. Different kinds of people, according to their budgets, live. Ajijic is by far Gringolandia.
Right. Ajijic. That's what I have friends who live there.
Not to live there because I did not move to Mexico or any foreign country just to live among people that are snobbier than me, older than me, and much more entitled and much less culturally competent, and just believe that the world owes them a whole. And I'm sorry if anyone from my area is listening to that, but it's been my experience. So I choose to live 3 towns down more, which is more Mexicanish, which is Lake Chapala, which I believe has a more beautiful Malecon, which is the waterfront. I have to translate everything because not everybody knows the references we're talking about. And I live in a purely Mexican neighborhood that is super quiet. My only neighbors are a Mexican family in front. I don't even hear my other next door neighbors on the other side. There's a house there, nobody lives there. And my only neighbors that make any noise are the goats that live in front.
Right.
I have conversations with my dogs all we hear meh all day. And a handful of bunnies that are all in this little mini farm. Those are our neighbors. And I love it.
Now, let me just say this though. If I was somebody getting ready to retire, and I know many people fall into this, because as you and I have talked about, I'm very active in the fire community. Mm-hmm. And when somebody tells me I want to retire, but what scares me the most about becoming an expat is the language barrier. Because as Americans, we know 2/3 of a language, not even one, let alone 2 on average.
Yeah.
There's something to be said for a place like Bahia, because it is soft. It's extremely soft. Yes, you don't have to learn any Spanish to live there.
That's correct. Mm-hmm.
And still, it would cost, depending on where you're coming from in the US, it would cut your cost of living at least in half. If you're coming from one of the coasts, oh my God, you're going to cut your cost of living by 75%. Yeah.
In my case, where my industry was shut down in 2020, and we were forced into, Northern California near the Bay Area, my cost of living went up easily 80 or 90%.
Right.
And it was such a big sticker shock to live in that area, among other things, that one day, a year ago, I made the decision the same day, and I said, to hell with all this. We are heading back to Mexico. This is for the birds.
Right.
We can't afford to live in this place.
Right. Now, I'll give you one other comparison there just for your viewers and listeners. When we moved from Belize to here, we reduced our cost of living from Belize by roughly half. Belize is a very
Belize is very
expensive town. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, I've heard about that. Yeah, and it's not as safe in Belize, right?
no, absolutely not.
Mm-hmm.
From a safety point of view, I would, my argument would be in the right area in Mexico, you're safer than most areas in the US. Well, I mean, from a scientific point of view, there is no place in the Americas safer than Merida, Mexico, except for Boise, Idaho. That's the only town safer than Merida, Mexico is Boise, Idaho. And who wants to live in Boise, Idaho in January? You know, and Merida is so safe.
Safe, but too hot. We lived there for 6 months.
Right, summers, I've been there.
The weather was
summer,
a big deal breaker there, and the fact that their staple food was pork. I lived sick in that town, but I was freezing at 90 degrees.
Right.
Like, what's happening here? It's all a matter of what you get acclimatized to.
Exactly.
So funny.
So again, for people thinking about being expats, I could see the draw of the lake. And let me also say this, I think it's more an accessible area to live than San Miguel if you have any physical challenges.
Yeah, hands down.
San Miguel, if you're physically challenged, this is a tough place to live because this is a walking town.
Mm-hmm.
Even if you have a car, you park it somewhere and you walk around the town. This is a tough town to live in if you're challenged, I think.
Right. I would, that's a very safe, that's a very great observation, actually. It's so true. Because there's so many people that have physical challenges that are living in this area. They find, the Lake Chapala Society is a great place to meet, and it helps them with lots of resources. In Chapala, there's the American Legion, which is, the expat central there, which attracts a lot of conservative types, veterans. And there's lots of people, there's plenty of people in wheelchairs. So yeah, you're right about that. You're right about that. Absolutely spot on. Mm-hmm.
However, if you are older and you want to extend your life, the lifestyle of San Miguel of walking every day does that.
Mm-hmm.
So it really depends on what you're looking for in your retired years. But I will say this, if you're going to retire, whether it's the traditional retirement or the fire retirement, your dollars are going to go a hell of a lot further in Mexico than they are in Kansas City.
Oh yeah, for sure. Now let's lead into what fire means. Because people that are listening, they're like, what in the world is he talking about? Is there a house on fire? Are you a fireman? What does what does fire mean?
I am not a bombardero.
An acronym here.
Right. So FIRE stands for Financially Independent Retire Early.
Okay.
The FIRE community is a group of people from first world countries, quote unquote, US, Canada, Europe, Australia, that have figured out that if you increase your savings rate, decrease your debt, stop collecting crap in your life, that you don't have to work 40 years to retire 10, that you can work 15 years and retire for 45. And that community is a very supportive community teaching people how to do that. And I happen to be very active in it. And I'm especially active in a niche of it that's called geofire, which is financially independent, retire early people who learn how to spend dollars outside of the country they retired in so that their dollars go further.
It's the arbitrage mentality.
It's absolutely, it is arbitrage.
Go from a higher currency where you're earning, you know, we're talking about US dollars. Of course, that's our
right.
We're talking about euros. We're talking about, in some very rare cases, maybe British pounds, if you're from, what else?
Well,
what
and
other-
loonies.
Okay.
Loonies. Canadians definitely fall into this
Canadian
category.
dollars, yes.
Yeah, loonies. So you're talking about cultures that if they can take their currency they're making and spend it in a different country, in the case where I live, Mexico, I earn dollars, I spend pesos, and the effect is a completely upscale lifestyle. So in the concept of fire, one of the base structures of fire is to stop thinking about what you earn. This is very foreign for Americans. And instead, completely focus on what you spend. And control what you spend and take everything else and pay yourself first and invest those dollars so that you can stop worrying about how money's coming in. Okay. Some of us accomplish this by being entrepreneurs. Some of us accomplish it. I have a good friend of mine who's completely financially independent. He retired early and he was a teacher for 10 years. And it doesn't get much smaller in salaries than teachers. But you have to change your concept of earning to spending. And once you do that, anybody who makes over 45,000 a year, that seems to be the magical number. If you can make 40,000 or more a year, anybody can retire in 10 to 15 years and live the rest of their life without worrying about where money comes from. Doesn't mean they don't work still. I am fire completely, and I still work. But I no longer worry about payday. Right. So that's the concept, and it is once you get your mindset around that, the only negative to it is how angry you become that it wasn't taught in high school. You know, that nobody sat you down and said, you don't have to wait till 65 to retire.
But okay, you and I are in the same 50s, you know, range. So we grew up in the same 70s and 80s when we had a lot more energy than now.
Right.
We were a product of that era. How could our parents in that generation teach us those things? That information was only available to the elite at that time.
Well, there's no question about it that this is not a blame I'm putting on anyone of my parents' generation. At the end of the day, they didn't know any different.
Exactly.
But I can tell you right now that wealthy families have known about the concept of multi-generational wealth for centuries.
For centuries, right? It just wasn't broad information. Like, I mean, we're boots on the ground right now. Okay.
Right.
But like you say, 40% and you know, of Americans have passports, which I dare to say that's a high number. It's probably more conservative. whatever. There's no way, like, they're not counting us. Those types of statistics are not being reported in the US for sure.
Right.
And so we don't really know, but our job is to help increase that number. And because it's going to do a huge favor to the rest of the world, especially, I mean, and I don't want to just focus on Americans, but this information needs to be, spread. It absolutely needs to be spread.
Okay, so when it comes to fire, here's the basic things I think everybody should know. One is, it isn't about luck. Anybody can do this.
Anyone can do this. You're absolutely right.
It is extremely simple. And if you're making it complex, you're doing it wrong. It's extremely simple. It's not, I don't want to sell it that it's easy. This is not a get rich quick scheme, but it is simple. And anybody that is trying to sell you something that sounds complicated is probably not interested in you becoming fire.
Again, fire is financially independent, retire early, just in case anyone lost the whole context here.
Right.
Yes.
So anybody who reduces the amount of money they spend makes good investment choices, and investment choices are extremely simple. If anybody comes to me and says, let me give you a warning. I am not a financial planner. I am just a guy.
Here comes the disclaimer. Thank you.
Right.
Thank you.
Right. Having said that, if you invest in the total stock market, not individual stocks, the total stock market, something like VTSAX or VTI or BVUS, over the course of the last 100+ years, that has always gone up. There's a reason extremely wealthy people keep their money in the stock market. And so if you reduce your spending, control what kind of crap you buy, and invest money as you get raises instead of increasing your spending as you get raises, you're going to find in 15 to 20 years, you can say, hey, I like the idea of living in Mexico. And it's all very, very easy and affordable to do at that point. It's folks that keep buying stuff. By the way, everything I'm saying goes completely against the US culture. You know, I have friends who, if I tell them I have not owned a new car in 20 years, blows them away. Obviously, you're missing something in your life. You haven't bought a new car off the lot in 20 years. But if you control your spending and I'm not saying live poorly. I never once missed a meal. I never once didn't go on vacation. You know, I had all those things. The big difference was I knew, and I know today, that debt is something that will rob you of future memories. And crap, if you own a lot of crap, you have a huge anchor that limits what you can do.
Right.
And I think there's a better way.
When you bring up a very important point. When I first came to Mexico, I was following a lot of people who were living this type of lifestyle. And one of my dear friends that's also on this podcast, Christy Ogden, is a Canadian expat who started this lifestyle out of necessity. She could not afford to live in her native Canada. It just the numbers weren't it just wasn't working. So out of necessity, she found out that she could live, overseas, and And I started following her so closely, and she's become such a close, like a sister to me. I consider her, because she changed my life. I mean, and I would see another mom, and Christy had been traveling for over 10 years. I mean, I'm like, how can somebody full-time travel for 10 years? We can't wrap our head around it at the beginning. Okay.
Right.
Now that we've been doing it, yes, we can. We can wrap our head around doing this. But if you think about how expensive it is to keep living in with a mortgage and insurance and the cost of a car and gas is astronomical right now in the US. Absolutely. I mean, that just a car, I mean, it's a necessity, but it's unaffordable for many people right now. Once you put all of the numbers together, and I got thinking, you know, I had my house in Logan, Utah, a college town. It's not the most expensive place to buy a house. I had a very nice house there, not luxurious, 3-bedroom house. I turned that house into an Airbnb. But in the summer months when I had to keep, you know, my guests were, of course, they're not going to not use the air conditioner.
Right.
It's the desert surrounded by mountains. But my water bill and my my city bill was water and electric was $315 a month in Logan, Utah. That I started learning that I could live on my rent in Mexico not in Mexico City, but in a conservative town in Mexico would be maybe around that amount or maybe more. My current rent, I'm renting a 3-bedroom house in Chapala, Mexico for $500 a month.
Right.
I'm in a huge house. Now it's just my son and I, since the other one decided he was, you know, he needed to be on his own. He does at 25, he needs to be on his own. But we're in this huge house. It's way too big for us. We have all this extra space, so we decided to turn one of the rooms into a mini gym. Like, what are we going to do with all this space, you know? Oh, we do have a cat. The house is huge. I mean, we don't even know. We've never lived in such a big place as we live right now. We're living so well. So
yeah, I would,
for the same cost as part of our utility. We're not even talking about the other utilities like internet.
right.
I mean, it's kind of a no-brainer. Hello, think about it.
Yeah, especially now as so much of the American workforce has become remote.
Exactly. With the great resignation going on, why are you staying in those expensive countries? Go live somewhere else and live better. Come on. But what's the problem? You have to get past the fear factor. It isn't just financial.
Absolutely.
That is
It's
the
fear.
biggest obstacle for Americans, especially. I'm scared the cartel's going to shoot me. I'm in the state with the biggest cartel. Nothing's ever happened to me. Or if I did, I'm going to negotiate with the people and I say, hey, look, let me go. I don't have money. I may look like I do, but you know, I'm going to negotiate with them, and I'm just going to say, look, what do you want? You don't want to kidnap me because nobody's going to pay for my ransom.
Yeah, I have to say that my experience here in San Miguel when it comes to cartels is you have to work hard to get involved in a situation. You have to put yourself into a situation. The gringos, the expats that I have seen that have gotten into trouble had in their mind that they could compete in a business that the cartels feel is their business.
Mm-hmm.
And that put them in a bad situation. Now, none of them, even those people who did their very best to get hurt, we're not hurt.
Really try to get involved with the cartel.
You gotta try it.
Believe me, they have bigger fish to fry than to target an American who, I mean, they really do. They really have bigger fish. They're not going to bother you for the most part.
And they don't want the media attention. They don't want that. That's bad for business. But I have found it's quite safe to live here. As safe as it is to live in any city in America, But in America, you just use common sense. There's places you don't go at night, right? Here in Mexico, my argument would be there are businesses you don't try to get into because you're going to grab the attention of the people already in those businesses, and they're not going to appreciate the competition from a gringo.
Exactly.
If your plan is, I'm going to come to Mexico and sell pot to fellow expats, okay, good luck with that. But if your plan is, I'm going to come to Mexico, I'm going to retire, I'm going to live comfortably on a fraction of what I spend in the US, I'm going to eat amazing foods, I'm going to see some of the most amazing things in the world, just in Mexico. I'm not even talking about traveling outside of Mexico.
Mm-hmm.
If you have on your bucket list to go to the Grand Canyon, if that's on your bucket list in the US, for the love of God, go to the Copper Canyon here in Mexico. It's 10 times the size and much more beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just saying there's so many things you can do here at a fraction of the price and really enjoy. And I like America. You know, this past fall, I spent my fall, as I like to call it, my fall road trip was spent in the Tetons in Yellowstone National Park. They're beautiful.
Yeah.
But 3 years ago, the 5-day train ride through Copper Canyon was one of the best trips I ever took in my life. So I guess if I had one thing to say to Americans, it would be, especially from the States. The States are the worst there. Get a passport and explore your world a little bit. We only get one shot at this. So explore that world a little bit, reduce the amount of crap you own, and spend that money on to making memories instead of, I now have a collection of 700 Birkskin shoes or whatever. I'm saying something that I have no idea about, but
Stop. Yeah. Uh-huh.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Stop collecting crap and instead collect some memories. And Mexico's a great place to live and collect those memories.
I coincide. And another thing, the pandemic has shown us that life is so temporary. It's so ephemeral. What's the word? Ephemeral?
Ephemeral. Yeah.
Thank you. It's temporary. We don't have tomorrow promised.
Right.
We don't.
And so with that said, the only thing a question I get asked a lot because of my religious beliefs is, what do you think happens after you die? I've had many family members ask me that. And I say, the only thing I know for sure is we will be missed by the people who love us. And many of those people that I've lost or that may lose me, will lose me somewhere down the road.
Yeah.
I want to have great memories with.
Oh, I wasn't gonna cry. What? Stop it. Okay. I always think my mom that died in 2015, that died so sick and really, she did do some travel towards the end, but it was after my dad died in the line of duty that she was able to actually, like, without him. And then she died a very sad death of a stroke. I found her on a holiday in Utah, July 24th, lying in her in the kitchen.
Yeah.
With her hand extended out, asking me for help, but she couldn't vocalize it because she'd been half paralyzed by the stroke. I immediately called the fire department to put her in the ICU. It was very, very traumatizing. She had diabetes. She had high blood pressure. Her quality of life was so low.
Great.
And I think the way I live right now, I hope that I live out the rest of my years and I show my future generations, my kids and their generations, that there is another way to live out your life happily and quality with community. And people need to know that they don't have to be suffering in the US. Americans right now are suffering. I saw this. I saw the homelessness. I was living in the Bay Area, near the Bay Area last year. I saw an America that I did not grow up in. It was the saddest, most pathetic scenario I've ever seen. And I would go and I would feel the despair. I would feel the hopelessness that you now feel. And I'm talking about the tent cities in all of the major cities, and it is in all of the major cities in America now, including cold cities like Denver and Salt Lake City, where it's close to home for me. San Francisco was the saddest scenario I've ever seen. I was just telling a lady just yesterday who's considering coming down to Mexico, and she says, I'm scared. And I said, you don't need to be scared. She's from Petaluma, which is in Marin County in California, one of the most expensive areas in the whole United States, in San Francisco. She's like, all of my friends have moved away from that area because they're scared, because homelessness has taken over, and it's been taken over by homeless people and drug addicts. Okay. But I said, that's not all. What I observed last year when I was in the Bay Area is that there are people who have full-time jobs, good paying jobs in the Bay Area, and they can't afford housing in the area.
Right.
So they're living in tents. This is the middle class that is being eroded. And I said, you're in Utah, you're living in a sheltered bubble society, because you don't feel what's going on in the other major cities anymore. You've got this false sense of security that's going on. You don't think that's going to eventually become eroded with time over into sweet little sheltered Utah? You gotta, I mean, when that is going to be a rude awakening for many people when they start seeing their small towns being affected.
When my father and I years ago had a conversation, and let me just start off by saying my father and I politically don't see eye to eye.
Mm-hmm.
And as far as my lifestyle, living in another country, and this is beyond my father's ability to understand, let alone my financial situation, right? This would never, it makes no sense to him. So we were having a conversation along these very lines, where the question was, you know, why can't homeless people get off the streets? And I asked him, I said, Dad, the 4-bedroom home we grew up in a suburb outside of Chicago, how much did it cost you to buy that when you bought it? And yeah. I was 2 years old, so it was 1965. How much did it cost you to buy that house? And he said, that house was $17,800.
Yeah.
And I said, that year, Dad, what was your income roughly? He said, I was making $30,000 a year then. We were making nothing. And I said, okay, Dad, so that house today, that same house sold on the market 2 years ago for $1.7 million. So
in the Chicago area we're talking about, right?
In the Chicago area, right? So
wow.
For the numbers to work out, the person that bought that would have to make about $2.2 million a year
mm-hmm.
to have the same financial structure that you did when you bought it.
Very important point here. Oh my gosh.
So when you say, why is there homeless folks? It comes down to the fact that, especially when you're talking about in cities, but all over the US, but especially in cities,
mm-hmm.
there is no such thing as affordable housing.
Mm-mm.
You know, you can't buy a house for less than what you make in a year unless you are compensated, you know, six-figure compensation. And when my dad bought that house,
Mhm.
he was a barber. So as I tried to explain to him, the days where a barber can buy a home in a major city in the US are gone.
Those are gone, long gone.
Right. That's just the facts of what it is right now. And so the side effect of that is there's more homelessness. Americans live paycheck to paycheck.
Mhm.
That means they're 2 paychecks from being homeless. Even the best Americans on average are 2 paychecks from being homeless.
Yeah.
So at the very least, we should have empathy, understanding how people got there.
And I want to intervene here and interject by saying that in the Bay Area, this was a shocking thing to hear from me, was that if you're under 100 short $1,000, let's say 110, I can't remember the exact figure, but let's say $117,000 is considered poverty level.
Right.
That is shocking. For the rest of us that grew up in you know, mid-America, middle class, to think that, I mean, if we were living in, for me in Utah, that would be a great salary. But in the Bay Area, it's no wonder people are living in tent cities. And these are working class people. We're not talking about drug addicts or people who,
Right.
I mean, what's going on here?
When you think about the fact that, again, I don't want this to in any way become political, but when you think about the fact that the person that's serving you the hamburger is working 40 hours a week and they can't afford to rent a 1-bedroom apartment within 25 miles of where they work, nobody can be surprised that we have a homeless situation under those conditions, right?
Exactly.
So now we've really gone into the weeds, but this is a reason I think for me, whether I was retiring early, as in my case situation, or if I was just 65 and retiring, the reason that I would look for places to spend my retirement dollars where I could be treated better.
Mhm. Oh, amen to that.
And indeed, when it comes to services, there's no comparison how I'm treated today. Not just the culture, which is amazing, not just the community, which is amazing, just services. My internet is faster than my internet ever was in Kansas City. I have 100 meg down, fiber optics, and it cost me $28 a month.
Wow. Yeah.
Services are just better. People think of Mexico as Tijuana or as Cancun. But the truth is, Mexico has one of the largest growing middle classes in the world. Mexicans around me are middle class people. They just save more money than we do.
They're more resourceful and they don't just throw stuff out like a blender. Like I had to, my blender broke down. That guy's like, "You're throwing out a perfectly good blender. What are you doing?"
Right.
But I didn't want to take the time to even look for somebody who could repair it. So I just like, take it, you know?
Right.
And I bought myself a new blender. I'm such an American. It's embarrassing.
We're Americans.
We're Americans. That's what we do.
That's right. I'm sizing down a little bit right now, minimalizing a little bit more in my life because as of May 1st, I will be homeless by design. I'm going to be traveling quite a bit. As you know, I'm going to be doing the Camino de Santiago, and then I'm going to be traveling in Europe for most of 2022. So I'm sizing down to fit into carry-on for this trip. I'll leave a tub or so here with my daughter who's going to be here, but the rest of it's going with me in a backpack and a carry-on. Well, the effect of that is I have clothes that I gave to my maid. I asked her, if you want these, they're yours. Now to her, she said, absolutely, I want them. I said, well, they're pretty big on you. She goes, no, we'll sell those.
See,
And
it's a whole different mentality.
that's totally different mentality. That's the resourcefulness that exists here.
Yeah, it's amazing. So honestly, and here comes somebody with some music by
Welcome to Mexico.
Right. Here we go.
Right.
This is Mexico. Okay.
Welcome to Mexico.
Welcome to Mexico. And that's the beautiful thing about the Mexico part, you know. And my son's like, can I buy some ice cream? Yes, get some ice cream. I'm authorizing him to get some ice cream. I haven't let him buy ice cream in a while. So we're getting a typical interview here, you know.
Right.
I can't remember what I was gonna tell you. What was the last thing you were saying?
Well, we were just talking about the reasons I think it's so positive to leave the US right now.
Right.
And even if Mexico isn't your destination, if it's something where you need to speak, you need to feel comfortable. Well, this is such a stupid excuse not to come to Mexico, because you can come here and never speak Spanish if you want to. But if that's something that really, really concerns you, there are places in the world that you can go to, the Philippines, as an example, that you could go to and completely speak English all the time.
Belize being one of them, the Philippines.
Belize.
What are some others? There's so many.
Well, there's so many. Now, I would argue, if you're going to go to Belize, that with the exact same amount of Spanish knowledge, you could come to San Miguel or the lake.
Exactly.
And live very, very comfortably and more comfortably than Belize, and be just fine. But there's places all over the world.
Yeah.
And right now, the argument would be that if you are retired, you're American, you're just retiring now, that you are a middle-class worker as a shrink in the US, and you now are expected to live on Social Security, whatever that may be for you, a couple $1,000s a month. That if you're trying to make that work in the US, the only thing keeping you there is fear.
Yeah.
That's it, because it sure doesn't make any sense.
So I have a friend here in this area who early retired on $1,100 a month. Where in the US can you live on that? That was her rent. It was in a tent, exactly. You know, it's virtually impossible.
Yeah.
Now she's able to live, you know, and is so happy to live here because she can, you know, and I see her traveling back and forth between the US all the time to see her grandkids. I mean, that is a beautiful thing.
Absolutely. I'm kind of blessed there in the fact that because I was so active, I still am so active in fire, I find I am quote unquote retired very lucky. So now what I do, my gift to my kids and my grandkids is always memories. So we don't buy each other stuff. We go somewhere. This past the last 3 weeks, I just got home, as you know, just got home Sunday. We spent the last 3 weeks, which is our birthday month. January is our birthday month because a lot of us were born in January. And the family got together in Puerto Vallarta and spent a month in Puerto Vallarta enjoying the ocean. You can afford to do that here.
$1 million view.
Oh yeah. No, geez, it was insane.
You're, like I told you, I mean, your life is enviable. People think that we just live like in these all-inclusive resorts. That is not the case.
no, no.
You were able to do that for a month and spend quality time with your family. I mean, what better gift can you give your family than that?
Oh yeah, these are the memories that that my grandkids, later on when they tell their children about Papa, it's about the time we were in Puerto Vallarta and hung out at the beach together, right?
Mhm.
So, and it, no material thing could I get them that would equal that value.
No.
I just want to do one last thing. It sounds like I'm selling something about San Miguel, but I'm really not. I just live here. But that image behind me is a picture I took of the Jardín here. A Jardín, for my American friends, the Jardín is a park that's in the center of town, usually in front of a church. Okay.
Mhm.
And it's Mexicans use the Jardines. There's multiple in a city, usually. They use the Jardín as their living room. They all go there in the evening, sit together and spend the evening chatting, and us gringos are there also. And it's a wonderful community place. And that's the main Jardín here in San Miguel de Allende in front of the parroquia. So it's a gorgeous place. I highly recommend
it. The church,
the main church.
That's right here.
Yep.
And
So
we got
you're
the back
seeing,
view, but the front view is even more beautiful. But anyway.
that's the back view. And
Mhm.
this picture is the front of that area, which is this pretty park that everybody sits and chats about the day's events.
It's pretty much the center of San Miguel's city life, you would say.
It absolutely is.
Okay.
Absolutely is.
Yes. So if you want to meet new people or see people you already know, they might just be in the Jardín right there, which translates to garden.
Which is very common.
Which is very common.
It's also
so it's like a plaza.
Amazing, right? Amazing place to go people watch.
Which is the funnest activity of all, and it's free.
Absolutely, doesn't cost a penny.
The best things in life are free. So in summary, I would say that our main theme here has just been, be smart. If you're smart and if you're wanting to create a better life than you already have, and quit struggling so much, listen to this advice. I think this has been one of my most important interviews I've done so far. This would be a deep dive into what you can do in Mexico. Our main focus is Mexico for sure, especially San Miguel de Allende. But really, and it's so geographically, it's desirable. You're so close to the US and Canada.
Right, absolutely.
That's another big draw. Maybe you're not ready to go and do what I've done. I did the hardest things first. I started with Argentina. It was just way far away from everywhere. And now Colombia, but maybe you're not ready to do that. But
Right.
Mexico could be a very nice soft landing, a very good starting point for you.
And let me just say this, I just want to leave folks with something actionable they can do, okay? And so here would be my action point I would give anyone. I give everyone who's interested in learning about fire. There is a book out there called The Simple Path to Wealth by J.L. Collins. You can even find this in PDF version online for free.
Oh, nice.
Okay.
Nice.
Go read the book. It's going to walk you through a lot of what I've talked about. And then if you have questions, email me. I'll be happy to answer any questions. Fire is a passion for me, not a business. I don't ever charge anything to give my advice on what to do and what not to do. But if you're in America, for the love of God, change the way you're living so that someday you can live any way you want to.
Mm-hmm.
And
amen to that. Amen to that. There's a lot more details, obviously, you can go into. Create a business, work online. There's nothing that should tie you to the current climate in America.
Absolutely.
If you're unhappy, you can change that.
You know, I built a business in Belize and I built a business here in Mexico. So both of those last year. And then of course I still own my business in the States. I would just like to tell people, this is doable. I mean, I have many friends who have gone to, who become expats, and what they do in some way or another, and both of my businesses did this too. What they did was they solved a need in the expat community. They saw something, they got here and said, you know, I wish I could figure out a way to do this, whatever this was. And then they said, you know, that's a business. And started a business solving that pain.
Yeah.
And that's how I built my business in Belize and how I built my business in Mexico. Both of them were very profitable. Both I sold for a nice profit. I'm not that smart. Anybody can make this work if they want. And there's resources out there. Your show, a great example. There's a lot of people out there who've done this. This isn't that hard.
In my case, I came from, my dad was a police officer, died in the line of duty. We didn't have money. I didn't come from mom. My mom was a housewife, never worked. Okay, I can't say that I did not have access to upper America. I did not come from that background. And of course, a very sheltered life that I lived, that I came from. So to think that I moved to Argentina and one day I'm at church, somebody says, I want you to teach English in my English Institute. And I said, what's that? And she says, I have an Instituto de Inglés. I'm like, what's an Instituto de Inglés? And she says, I want you to come talk to my students in English. Is the one skill I knew, one skill. Okay. That I started teaching English before long, and I was in a small town near Buenos Aires, Argentina. It wasn't the mecca of business, not even far, not even close to that. I started in that one thing. Before long, I had more students, more and more. Things got to the point where I had to hire teachers. And then I was asked to work in doing translation from Spanish to English and proofreading. And oh my gosh, I had so much work. That one skill of speaking English.
Great.
Oh my freaking gosh. I was in the right place at the right time. And then I had clients like Greenpeace that were my clients. I'm not impressed by I'm not trying to impress anyone. I'm just trying to impress upon you that you can create something that you can't do back in your home country in a developing country.
Right.
And make a fortune or not, but live better and a higher quality of life and be happier, because in the end, it's all about happiness.
Yeah.
And you can create something that you can contribute and make a business or a life out of. Do it. Do it.
Absolutely.
You're going to find your way and you'll be able to do things that you can't even imagine. And the final thing I want to say is you are going to find an appreciative target that is going to value whatever it is that you're able to contribute to this world, whatever your gift is or whatever becomes of that. You're going to find, you will be amazed at the things you will be able to create in another country.
Okay, so you're right. I think that's a really good summary of what you can do. Now, I want to, if you don't mind, just before we sign off, just want to real quickly just give a glimpse. Again, remembering what I spend, my entire monthly cost of living here is under $1,000 a month, everything I do. But let me just real quickly here turn off my background. And this is obviously, my home. And well, real quickly, I'll do let me see here if it's possible for me to flip this around just so I can show you guys. This is my home. I have 3 bedrooms, 2 bedrooms downstairs here with 2 baths. And then, and by the way, this home that I was telling you about, it came fully furnished.
Oh my goodness.
Right. So I show
Okay, you're on pause.
clothes
Right?
and a toothbrush. Now this I am.
It's freezing just a little bit, but that's okay. We'll get the gist of what you're doing.
Okay. This is my 2nd floor bedroom, and then I have
You're freezing again. I don't know if you can hear me.
my back terrace.
Back terrace, okay.
And this up here is my front terrace.
Terrace number 2.
And then I have 2 downstairs.
Wow.
So I'll show you my main form of transportation is my quad in my driveway.
Oh wow.
And I live in what would be called in the States a gated community. So again, this is all for under $1,000 a month, fully furnished. I'm just saying it's doable. Anybody can do this.
In a safe community, gated community. Wow.
Absolutely.
You've really even surprised me.
Yeah.
Honestly.
That's why when we were talking before we started the interview and you said, how affordable is it? I like I said, this is an amazingly affordable place to live. And this is one of the most expensive towns to live in Mexico.
Mm.
So
I'm astounded myself, and I've been here a while.
yeah.
Yeah.
I highly recommend vacationing here.
Oh, this has been great. Honestly, very, very eye-opening. Is there anything else that we haven't maybe mentioned in this interview that you would like to bring in to just wrap things up?
If you have any questions about fire or living in San Miguel, email me. My email address is info@overthathill.com.
Overthehill.com?
Not over the hill, over that hill.
Over that hill. Love it.
.com. Email me. I'll be happy to answer any questions I can.
I love it. Love it. Hold that thought for just a second. For those of you that have been watching this interview, thank you for watching. We are creating a community of valuable information. Hopefully it's valuable to you. We invite you to like and subscribe. Leave comments below because we don't want to do any interviews or provide any information if we're not really giving you the information that you want to get. So feel free to reach out to Robert and I, and hopefully, and we provide these interviews in both English and Spanish. So we're not just catering to the English community, but we're also creating information in Spanish so that you can get the information in both languages. And eventually we will translate into both languages and more when I get to that point, hopefully. So Robert, I just want to thank you so much for your time. I mean, honestly, I have learned so much from you.
Well, I really appreciate the opportunity to visit with you. The best part about living here in Mexico is you have the time to make friends.
And then friends will make time for you.
Right. And that's one of the cool things about living here is we have this community because we have the time to make a community.
And if you haven't ever lived in community, which most Americans are not used to living in community, you don't know what you're missing.
Absolutely,
the typical
I agree.
American, I can honestly say, is individualistic, competitive, and this isn't their fault. and lonely. If
I
you
agree.
want to cure your loneliness, move to Mexico or another country. This is our suggestion. It may not be for you, but it very well may be. Give it a shot. You will be so glad that you did. Is that fair to say?
Absolutely.
Namaste. Thank you so much for coming on. Your information has been priceless, invaluable.
It's been a real pleasure. Buen dia.
Buen día. Nos vemos. Adiós.
Adios. Hasta luego.
Hasta luego.